Good afternoon and welcome back to another ironic introduction to another video. Today I'm going to talk about the bug fix for Clairvoyant and Morningstar, where they would sometimes heal when using her special 2 when the attack dealt no damage to her opponent, and Morningstar, who is able to lifesteal from the 6.2.6 champion boss even when she inflicts no damage. So for me, I think that's really important to recognize that Black Widow Clairvoyance, maybe if there's a situation where the damage is being reduced to 0, that's totally reasonable, and that phrasing, reduced to 0, is incredibly important because I'll talk about that in a moment. But specifically for her interaction with the champion boss, who is indestructible, I believe both Black Widow Clairvoyant and Morningstar should be able to lifesteal. Any champion should be able to lifesteal off of an indestructible opponent because of the way indestructibility works. So what's incredibly important to recognize is that other games have indestructibility, and in indestructibility interactions like Magic the Gathering, indestructibility prevents a creature from dying, but it doesn't prevent a creature from taking damage. And what does that mean? So it means that if you deal 3 damage to a creature with a hit point of 3, and it's indestructible, it goes down to 0 hit points, and it stays alive. Its health is essentially static locked. And if the turn ends and the damage dissipates, its health stays at 3, right? It doesn't permanently stay at 0 health. It just, would have stayed alive, survived the damage phase, the damage counter drops off, and then it goes back to 3 health, essentially staying at 3 health. But let's say you deal 3 damage to a creature, you then remove the indestructibility buff, it would immediately go down to 0. That's because the damage is still applied. The damage was still registered, the creature just could not be killed. Indestructible does not mean reduces damage to 0. And this is incredibly important because lifesteal interactions like Black Widow Clairvoyant and Morningstar are built on the fact that your character is doing damage. It doesn't matter if the opponent cannot be killed, the damage is still there. And in order to kind of make that argument or justify that argument, first I need to define what indestructibility is from Kabam, because there's no exact phrasing on it on the champion boss. You see here, it just says the champion gains 5 indestructible charges, which is totally fine because we actually have other champions, 2 in particular I can point out. One most recently is Tarax, who says Tarax indestructible charge buffs only ignore damage. So that's the first part, is ignore damage. And even farther back we have Luke Cage, an earlier champion, who has when Bulletproof Skin allows Luke Cage to become indestructible and ignore all incoming damage. So that's it. This right here, between Tarax and Luke Cage, that is our definition of indestructibility in Marvel Contest of Champions. Ignore all incoming damage. Notice how that's not reduced damage to 0. When you ignore incoming damage, that damage still exists. It's still occurring. It's just not registering on Luke Cage's health pool. That does not mean he's taking 0 damage. It means his health is static locked. It cannot be affected. And as a result, you can still lifesteal. He just won't be taking that damage on his end. So that's really, really important to kind of differentiate, and maybe that's just me being technical or overly analytical, but that's the way I've seen indestructibility handled in other games when I've played around it, and that's the way it's been interacting for 6 months, and I don't see a plausible reason to change it now. I think that it just kind of unnecessarily irritates the player base, and while I think that there's potentially reasons to argue for why it can be bug fixed or can't be bug fixed or all that jazz, that's a whole different kind of a video. I think that in this instance, the way indestructibility is defined in the game, the way it's defined just as a word and a term in general, I think it's perfectly reasonable to allow champions who lifesteal, or essentially heal based on damage dealt. Note Clairvoyant's specific phrasing, which is regenerates 35% of the damage dealt. Morningstar has the same thing with her lifesteal ability, heals based on damage dealt, that the damage is still occurring. It's just being reduced to 0. So I need a situation where damage is quote-unquote being reduced to 0 in order to push this farther. I feel like that's the next step. If my argument is, okay, indestructibility is occurring, the damage is being ignored, so champion boss's health stays at 10%, but you can still heal as a result. In order to kind of push and further cement that, I need a situation in the game where damage is essentially being reduced to 0. I have one, actually. We have the Act 6.3 Captain America Infinity War with destructive feedback. At the start of the fight, defender gains a kinetic shield preventing damage for 10 seconds. Bam! That's it. That is the phrasing Kabam needs to use to state Lifesteal does not work here. Because while active, all damage that is attempted note word attempted by the attacker excluding damage from special 3 attacks is stored. So in this situation, they have used the proper wording and phrasing and terminology in order to state that the damage is not even occurring in the first place. For indestructibility, ignore all damage does not mean damage did not occur. Damage still occurred, it's just being ignored. Destructive feedback, prevent damage, no damage triggered, no lifesteal. That's the argument I'm making. That's why I think that this bug fix shouldn't actually being occurred, and I'd like to see it reverted. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.